Nava Sonnenschein is visiting us from the Middle East today. Nava is one of the founding members of a village called Neve Shalom, Wahat al Salam, which is an intentional community, half Jews and half Palestinians, who chose to live together in peace and equality between them. And I think it's over 40 years now, if I'm correct. David Matz has been deeply involved with Neve Shalom for a very long time on the board of the American Friends of Neve Shalom, raising money, supporting their work. And I've had the great pleasure of visiting there. The village is intended to be, and I'll let Nava talk about it more, I'm sure, but it's intended to be a demonstration that it's possible for people from opposite sides of a divide in a deeply divided society to live together in peace and to do conflict well and to do it constructively. And in doing that, they have developed a school for peace, of which Nava has been the director for the last 8 years. She was also a founder of it. She's trained thousands of Jews and Palestinians to be facilitators of groups in conflict or to become change agents through their profession. The village, Nava and her neighbors and colleagues have developed their own dialogue method, which produces really deep communication and some really powerful transformation. And so Nava is going to be, she's got a doctorate from Hebrew University in the identity of the Jewish majority in conflict and their processes of change. She's taught widely, she's published widely, and today she's going to be talking about the unique working method, working with groups in conflict, that was developed at the School for Peace. Nava, we are delighted to be able to welcome you to join us once again. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. I do have your PowerPoint file, so when you want me to put it on the screen, you just let me know and I will support you in whatever way I can. Nava Sonnenschein.
Thank you all for coming, and it's a crazy time. You know, in Israel we are in a lockdown, complete lockdown, that Netanyahu decided. We have a second wave of the coronavirus, and politics and health are mixed together, and it's really not an easy time. I will tell you a little background about the village and the idea and the School for Peace method, and we will deal later with processes of change. We will deal with the dynamics that is going on between Jews and Palestinians when they sit together and they talk about the conflict. Village where I live is called Neve Shalom, Wahat Salam, Oasis of Peace in English, and it's located 30 kilometers west of Jerusalem. It's the only community where Jews and Palestinians decided to live together. We do it by electing people to major committees equally, deciding together decisions, and trying really to create alternative to what is going on in Israel. You know that 20% of the Israeli citizens are Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, but there is a deep inequality between Jews and Palestinians inside the state of Israel. In addition, since 1967, Israel is occupying the West Bank and Gaza partially, but West Bank, and there is a big conflict. It's a military rule, and it's a huge problem. So we wanted to create a community that will say to the world, no, we can live together, and not only live together, to create really one community where each of us is keeping their own identity, but we share power positions equally, and we We came there, we were 4 families, today there are 75. We were not supported by the government because it's a totally different idea of separate and rule, of controlling the minority and so on. When we came, we needed to build a school that is different from in Israel, the school system is separated. There are Arab schools and Jewish schools. And we wanted to create a bilingual, bicultural, binational school. We started with our few kids, and today there are more than 250 kids that are bused every day from surrounding communities to the village, half of them Jewish, half of them Arabs. You can go on. It was the first one in Israel. Today there are about 7 schools, bilingual schools that were creating according to the model that we have developed. The model is saying that the kids are studying from very early age the 2 languages, the 2 cultures. Also, history is taught not only from one point of view, but both points of view. It's not one, like in United States, there is 1 month of Black culture or Native Americans, but everyday life, the perspective is more complex. It's not only one-sided, but really they share both cultures, both historical narratives, both languages, and so on. We have also a spiritual center in which we do cultural programs and also interface programs between the different religions. In our conflict, there are major 3 religions, Jewish, Christianity, and Islam. And the idea to have dialogue between them. The founder of the place was a believer. He was a priest, and he thought in the beginning to create a village for the 3 monotheistic religions, but the people who came to live in the village are basically, most of them are secular. But he was open, Father Bruno Hussar was open to the other ways that we wanted to live together. The main outreach of the community is the School for Peace, where we thought, okay, we will have a unique community, but we want to spread the message elsewhere in Israel and in Palestine. And in 79, which is 41 years, we established the School for Peace. The name is little, sometimes people don't understand. We are not a regular school, but an institute that does conflict management workshops between Jews and Palestinians from all over the country. Tell you a little bit about the methodology. When we look between methods, we look at the continuum. On one side, we have those who are working from the contact hypothesis, and on the other side, those who work from the intergroup perspective. So we are more in that side of the continuum. We work and look at the dynamics that is going between the two main identities, national identities that are in our region, in Israel and Palestine. And it's not just, meeting each other and getting to understand the other. This is one aspect of the work, but it's much deeper, and there are several unique things that I will talk about that create our method unique. There is a book that we wrote about it, Israeli and Palestinian Identities in Dialogue, that was published in Rutgers University Press, but I will tell you a little more about it. The main problem with contact hypothesis is that people have difficulty to generalize from their own experience to the macro level. And they would say, the Arabs I've met in the group are wonderful, but they don't represent the macro level, the whole. So we had to look for another way of working in the encounters which we created. Our vision is to create another society in Israel. Today we are very far from our vision, and but we don't give up the vision. We want a humane and just society. We want to develop, and among our goals is that developing the awareness of the participant to the conflict, to construct their identity. This is based on developmental theories of racial and ethnic identities, to construct healthy identities that is not based on racism or internalizing racism, to teach critical thinking. At that time, when we started, it was not common, it was not at all. Just to state clearly in the groups that we are here together to speak about the conflict. In many of the groups, even existing today, doing encounters between the two sides, they avoid the conflict. But we say no, in order to get a deep understanding, we have to put the conflict on the table. We also look at the dynamic not between individuals, but between, in our case, it's two groups. Once I have done a workshop in LA Unified School District with Black and Latino and white and Native American. So there it was between 4 groups, but we look in the group about the dynamic not between the individuals, although they exist, but between the 2 groups or more that are in conflict. So it's intergroup in that sense. Also, it is very important to us to look at the issue of power, of the asymmetry in power relations. As I said before, in the macro level, we have a lot of discrimination against the Palestinian minority. Like no Arab party was part of the government ever since the establishment of Israel. Now, the discrimination is in all aspects of life. In 48, 530 something villages and towns, Arab Palestinian towns and villages were destroyed, and their people were expelled and became as what is known today the refugee problem. So we want in the group to look what is going on between the participants when they talk. And there are many dynamics that are very similar in the group where they come to participate and in the macro level. For example, if the group is sitting in the room, what language they will speak? we have two languages, but Hebrew is the one that almost everybody knows. And we tell the group both languages are official languages. You can talk what language, and eventually some Palestinians in the group start to speak Arabic. And then the Jewish participants will feel very uneasy, and they will say, well, we don't understand. Why don't you speak Hebrew? You know Hebrew. Why don't you just talk? We came here to talk, not to not understand. And sometimes they even split the Arab group and they talk only to those who are speaking to them in Hebrew and ignore those speaking in Arabic. And we show the group and we connect between the dynamics that is going in the room and the dynamic in the macro level when Arab parliament member spoke little Arabic in the Israeli parliament and everybody went out. You know, it's not out there. We see the connection. We see the issue of asymmetry, and we see also the connection between phenomena that are happening inside the room and the phenomena outside the room. This is something very powerful compared to the method that I mentioned before, the contact hypothesis, that people cannot escape to a position that the problem is out there. They see that it's me and you and you and you in the room are part of the system, of the mechanism that is keeping the status quo. A little about measure of success. Now 75,000 Jews and Palestinians participated in the School for Peace workshops. Since we developed a unique method of working with groups in conflict, so we have trained over the years above 1,000 facilitators of groups in conflict that today lead many of the peace and human rights shared society organizations in Israel and in Palestine. Also, the graduates of the School for Peace, I will talk about it more in detail. They say that it was a formative experience in their life. It really changed their life and their perspective, how they look at the conflict. Also, we entered several universities in the beginning of the 90s in Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion, and Haifa, and Hebrew universities. Until today, we are teaching a course which is one semester that enables students, as I said before, the school system is separated, but in the university, they study in the same campus. And they study mathematics and biology and whatever, but they never talk about the conflict. So we enable them to come once a week for 3 hours and to talk about the conflict. And it's very powerful. It's a semester-long courses, and we are planning also we are expanding them also to different colleges, not only universities. Our knowledge that we developed, there were many theses, PhD theses and others that were done on our work, and we think we had an influence in the field with our unique method. We were also invited to do workshops in other areas of conflict where there is asymmetry in power relations between the sides, like North Ireland, Cyprus, South Africa, University of Peace in Costa Rica, LA Unified School District. So we tried it, and we tried the method also to work in gender issues and other issues. Also, what is unique is that the Palestinians from Palestine attended, and from Israel attended the School for Peace programs, also in very tense conflict situation, because they see that we are looking, people in our workshops can look at each other at the same eye level. Can give you an example of change that people are talking about how it is when they realize that in a group, when somebody is saying, when I was growing up, there were things that were forbidden and things that were self-evident. You are an Israeli Arab. You are not a Palestinian. Palestinian is someone over there. You are not allowed to stand tall. You must not talk to a soldier. That is frightening. A soldier is an animal, not a human being. And watch out, because the Shabak is the Israeli secret services, is everywhere. The Neve Shalom course simply turned everything upside down. So there is a so what if there is a Shabak? Just talk. Yes, we can talk about what a Palestinian is, about whether you belong to that or don't belong to that identity. This was shocking and also transformational. I remember my shock at the first session. There was someone there who sat down and said, I want to speak Arabic. And I remember how that shocked me. My immediate thought was, why speak Arabic when we are trying to understand one another? And that in that same moment, I understood and I said to myself, why not? It's my mother tongue. This is my place. And I feel comfortable there. It suddenly seems a lot less absurd to speak Arabic. That is how it started. That it was an open workshop was really good, because that shifted me into thinking personally. I remember statements made by Jews there, like, you have to be loyal. And I remember that I said, we are not dogs. So on the one hand, it was not a nicey discourse of let's all be together like they conduct elsewhere. And on the other hand, it was not like a political party, it was a lot more psychological. So it gives you some taste of how it was different from the people, that they could speak to each other at the same eye level. In the 80s, we did mainly youth encounters. As I told you before, students are studying in separate schools. So we brought groups of 30 Jews and 30 Palestinians, a class from each side, and we divide the group into 4 groups of 15, and 3 days residential workshops we did. Until today we do it, but much less than before, because there are other organizations that are carry on workshops like that. In the beginning of the 90s, we entered 3 major universities and developed our method. And 15 years ago, we decided to create courses. We said the change in our facilitators is formative change. Like, people some people, not all of them, devote all their life for the resolving the conflict or creating more equality. But why not to influence other influential groups in the society? And we started to do courses for, we call them change agent courses for different professions that are connected to the conflict, like planners who are dealing with land. The issue of our conflict about land is central. The major process in our conflict is like when Israel was established, the main perception was to have as much land with as fewer Palestinians inside. And this kind of thinking is until today. The Arab towns and villages are very limited in expansions. The policy is to reduce them into their communities and not let them expand, and to build the Jewish kibbutzim, towns, other villages, Jewish villages, on land that was many years confiscated from them. Now they are doing the same also in the West Bank, in the occupied territories. So planners, they have a role how to, they can be a planner in a committee that is deciding about some area where there are Arab villages, and to be racist and just decide about how to expel the Bedouins from that area, or to be one that is standing and saying, no, this is not right. We have to treat them equally. So this is the idea of the change agent courses. You see the professions. Now in next month, we are adding one more profession. We want to work with artists. So we have worked with many of those groups. Each course is for a year or a year and a half. Some of them are across the border with Palestinians from both sides, from Israel and from Palestine and Israeli Jews. And some of them are just inside Israel between Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel. We got a grant in 2016. We worked with 120 up-and-coming politicians. I think we have a big problem in your country and in our country that the leadership is not working for peace or equality. You are before elections. I hope you will change the situation there. We have the same problem in Israel. So we decided to train young leaders. Hopefully some of them will reach the parliament, and they will have different priorities than just keeping their own seat or confiscating land from Arabs. And they will be people that had good experience for a year and a half with Palestinians and see that there is a partner in the other side. They even did simulation games about negotiation, about the final solution between Israel and Palestine. That was a very good program. Many of them now climbed the ladder, and the head of peace now is a graduate. We have few mayors. We have our graduates in the parliament already. Not from that group, but from another group of leaders in mixed towns. Sami Abu Shkhada is a parliament member. And the idea is, it's a big question, why we don't find more liberal leftist leaders to overcome those very extremist right-wing leaders that are leading many of the countries today. So I think it's a good question to discuss. Maybe later we can discuss it. These are some examples of these people that graduated this course. So you can see that people really are moving on, and we hope they will be in leadership roles in the coming years. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we got a grant from the USA that work with the mental health professionals. But Trump stopped the program in the middle. You know that he stopped supporting Palestinians. So this was across the border program, and we succeeded to do 2 of the program, and to work with mental health professionals and to train them to be facilitators of groups in conflict, and also experience negotiation, and also initiate projects. The third group, Trump stopped the funding, and we created by our own, even in the middle of the second group, and we continued with other funding to do the program. And people are active and doing and fighting against those phenomena that I mentioned. We, over the years, we have noticed several stages in the group process that repeat themselves with some variation, because the work is changing according to the political situation. We are sensitive to different, if there is a war with Gaza, it will impact our dialogue in the group. Or if there is a bomb somewhere in a bus, not recently, years ago, so it will impact what we do. But the stages that we notice in the groups, first they come and they, know each other, present themselves, and being polite with each other. But by the years, the politeness is less and less, and very quickly they get into starting to talk about the conflict. And usually the Palestinian group, either in Israel or if it is across the border, brings their situation to the room. The discrimination, the occupation, the land confiscation, house demolition, all that. And for the Jewish group, it's very much seems as a threat to their own positive image of their identity. And usually the next stage in the groups, that the groups try to resume power, to try to gain more power to itself. And in that, there is a kind of install of struggles over who is more humane. We have in our conflicts, it's unaware processes, but we bring them to the awareness of who is more humane. You know, I don't know if in United States you have the same, but in our conflict, each group wants to show the other group that they are more ethical, more humane than the other, and the other is portrayed as extremist, as a terrorist, as like that. After some rounds of who is more of a victim and who is more of a humane and so on and so on, there is a fifth stage in the group process that is more people it's not that everybody change everything, but people start to talk to each other with less defensiveness and more in the same eye level and more aware of the situation. In the change agent courses, we have also some stages of the program that always we start with a dialogue that is very intensive. This is for the inner change that people, and I will talk about it. And then we in the second stage, we bring them knowledge from their own fields that is connecting between the profession and the conflict. So if these are, we take the same example of change agent courses for planners and architects. So we will bring experts like Professor Oren Iftachel that is knowledgeable about the policy of land in Israel that is connected to the what we call Yehuda Galil. They hear the lecture and continue the dialogue, and then we bring the group to become creative about the project that they want to create to change the situation of inequality or occupation. Like the planners recently did work, we can move on, did work with you know, before this peace agreements with the Emirates, when they stopped the intention of annexation, it looked like it's going to happen very soon, the annexation, parts of Palestine. And this group was very active and created a conference to show what are the results of this Trump peace plan and the annexation, and they did also a petition that 400 architects and urban planners signed. This is a picture you can see. People negotiate for 4 days about the future of Jerusalem or the border. This is across the border program. And here they sign an agreement. It's like a Winnicott blanket thing. If they had this experience of a positive experience in reaching an agreement, then when they will be the leaders, they will remember it. The cross the border programs we do not in Neve Shalom, Wahat, Salam, because Palestinians. What is this? I don't know. We do. We go to Beit Jala, which is a place where both sides can meet each other. But this is a picture from our course for planners. This is an area that the planners were active, Khan el Ahmar, which is in E1 area that is in the middle of the West Bank. There is a small area that Netanyahu all the time want to annex and to build settlements in, and there is a village there that of Bedouins, Palestinians, and our people were active against demolition of this village that is there. Yeah, you see Khan el Ahmar. You know, they can come with bulldozers and just erase the houses and expel the people. This is a phenomenon that we see even in these days. It's not The method used educate children from different perspectives. Okay. Eben, what do we do with the questions? We will stop and have some questions and then continue, or what?
Well, that's up to you, Nava. So we have about another 20 minutes or so. So it would be nice to be able to address some of the questions that people have. So I don't know if
Okay.
you want to, yeah, you want to take questions now, or do you want to?
I think maybe I will talk about the major changes in the Jewish and the Palestinian groups that was recorded in the book The Power of Dialogue that was published in 2019. But I can take questions and then do it. How long do we go from now on? Only
We have
20?
about another 20 minutes.
20. No, so we go for questions.
Okay, great. So Caitlin, do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to hear you say a little bit more about how the children are educated from both perspectives, and also a little bit about the how practicality, how it plays out using both languages. Is it certain classes are taught in Hebrew and certain classes are taught in Arabic? And how do the children seem to adapt to that if they are newer to the system?
So both perspective, do I give you an example? We have in Israel Independence Day, which is after, Israel was established in 48, and I told you what happened in the Nakba, for the Palestinian people, it was a catastrophe. And how do you deal it in one system? So some of the activities they do separately, and some of the activities they do together. They go to a destroyed village. They mention people that were killed in both sides. But they are told to understand that there is no one story of history. So this is very important. And it's not easy. They go home, and maybe at home they tell them something different. And so it's, but I think it's much better than in the Israeli major systems that they learn only one story. That we were minority, the Arab countries fought us, and we had our independence, and so on. So it's really a different perspective about the language. Just to give you an example, what people say. In the process of change, when they changed, this led, it was bothering me the whole week, and I was trying to find, this is adult people, not little children in school. It was bothering me that the whole week I was trying to find connection between the Zionist outlook and the demand for equality that had arisen, and I couldn't find the solution. My stance started to shake loose, and I made some effort to run away from the question. It was not clear anymore whether I was a Zionist or not. I vacillated. I was ambivalent because a consciousness objector enable me becoming an objector to go to the army, enable me to make up my mind. I realized that it was an act that seems right to me. I had a feeling that if I refused to serve, then that was mean that I have decided. So it's a big, for adults in groups, in our groups, it's all turmoil. It's not an easy thing to get to this point that you admit that there is a contradiction between Jewish state and equality. So it's really a process. With the little children in the primary school, when they teach both languages, so each teacher is teaching its own in her own language, and this is how they learn from nursery school both languages, and it is working. Children has a good ability to learn the other languages. They take it naturally.
Thank you, Nava. Other questions that folks might have? That's really interesting. Other folks?
I have a question.
Isabel, yes, please.
Yeah, she said that if Trump stopped the money, so how will she get the money again, the grants?
Huh?
The grant from USA, we had to raise funds elsewhere. We have friends associations, and there are foundations that supported us, not in the same amount. So we cut the budget. We did it more modestly, but we did the program. We don't give up.
Never give up.
More questions?
Yeah.
I'll ask a question if that's
Thanks,
okay.
Rico.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that I'm very curious about is what the differences are, or what you've learned from your involvement. Like, how are dynamics different in Israel-Palestine compared to what you're seeing happening along lines of division here in the American context?
I'll tell you one thing that I was thinking today. You had the case of George, the black man who was killed, Floyd.
George Floyd.
Who was killed by the white policeman. We had this, and you had in America big demonstrations where white and black demonstrated. In Israel, we had a very similar case of Iyad Khalak, a Palestinian young man who was autistic, and he went from his home to the institute where he was spending his days, and on the way, the border police killed him as if he is a terrorist. But nobody went to demonstrate in the street for the life of the Palestinian young man that was killed. So there is a difference. But I think also in United States you see still a lot of racism against Black people and Hispanic people, and you see it here. We have both cases. We have leaders that are inciting against the minorities. The different, like the Black people were brought to America as slaves, and the crime of make them slaves is not resolved yet. I think one day maybe, but not resolved yet. In our case, the Palestinians are the indigenous people in Palestine, and the Jews came here. So, and in the West Bank, it's military occupation. You don't have military occupation. You have discrimination, yes, but not military occupation. So there are differences between, but there are also similarities, you know. Police is more harsh. The life of Black people is not as worse, you know, as life of white people. And the same here. The life of Palestinians, if they are killed, nobody cares in the Jewish Israeli Jewish population. And so there are similarities, but there are differences. I found the theory of developmental identities, racial and ethnic identities of Janet Helms very applicable to our own situation. And in our groups, we saw this developmental process of going from denial, even denying that you are a racist, to a place of taking responsibility with all the stages. And it is very similar. So I think that the method is practical also in other areas of conflict, and we can learn from each other's experience. Just recently, I read again the book of Toni Morrison, Beloved. So I read it a while ago, and recently I read it again. So I think that we have a lot in common, but there are also differences.
Thank you. Nava, what was the development model that you mentioned?
Of racial and ethnic identities of Janet Helms.
Janet Helm.
Yeah, there are several researchers that dealt with identity as not as a primordial, but as a developmental process. And it's different from the majority group, the group in power, the white in your case, and the minority group. The group of majorities, they have to go through a process that is, as I said before, in the beginning, it's a denial. No, it cannot be that a policeman would shoot an Arab just because he is an Arab. And then a stage of a dissonance. You start to feel that what you thought is not the whole story, a very important stage. And then you connect back to your own identity, but you are more aware to racism, and then you reach a stage that you start to take responsibility of what the majority did to the minority. And for the Black people or the Palestinian people, it's a different process because both groups are not coming from the same starting point. So for them, the first stage is just to pretend as if you study enough, so you will be as good as a white majority, like the people who deny their identity, and they just look about a pattern of success, like in Paulo Freire, language is internalizing racism. And then it's a kind of also dissonance when your identity is you realize that as much as you want to be like white people, you if a police is attacking you, it doesn't matter that you have PhD. So something is shaking, and it's a very difficult situation. It's because you are not here and not there. And then there is what she is calling immersion. You immerse yourself inside your own culture. Black is beautiful. You think you are angry at people that didn't do the process you have done and so on, but it's still very stereotypic. And then there is a stage that you can differentiate between people, white people that hate you, and those who are working with you and cooperate with others. I found this theory It's much more detailed that I explained now, but I think it's very relevant to both cases.
Thank you, Nava. There's another question in the chat that I think is really interesting from Nicole. Nicole, do you want to ask that about the outside community?
What?
Well, Nicole's question was about how the outside community has perceived the school and the town. What has been there? I'm sure it's changed over time.
You know, on 1st of September, we had arson.
Oh, no.
People came at night, at 2 at night, and put at fire our classrooms. Those classrooms that we spent thousands of hours of dialogue between Jews and Palestinians are all gone, burned by fire. So we have people who hate this work in our country, not everybody. On the other hand, we are teaching courses in major Israeli universities, and academic world, they appreciate our work. And you know, Netanyahu is inciting against all peace and human rights organizations in Israel. And so we are not supported, like our primary school is supported partially by the Ministry of Education, but School for Peace is not supported. On the 6th of September, those people came again at night, and we moved with the School for Peace staff, moved to the Fred Siegel Peace Library, and they tried to put it in fire. In this case, it's a more modern building, so the sprinklers really put off the fire. So we still have extremists in our country. Our prime minister is inciting against us. We don't get funds from the government, so we had to establish friends associations in Europe and in North America, and this is how. But we are very determined not to give up and to continue to work and to develop and to do conferences against annexation. And now we are active against house demolition in East Jerusalem. So we continue our programs in spite of the corona and the arson and all that.
Wow. Wow. Nava, there's a couple more questions popping up, but just to follow up on that real quickly, is that generally that what you're facing? Is the community universally hostile, or do you also have support?
No, I said, it depends. I think it's more extremist. It's not the general. But the media, for example, when we had arson, they were interested, but they never come to document or to our programs, although we make an effort. So it depends who. It's not the whole society, but in general, the peace movement is portrayed by the prime minister as traitors.
Yeah.
The head of B'Tselem was portrayed as a traitor. Some people feel threat. 15 years ago, we had, not 15, 8 years ago, we had a Tag Mechir group who came at night and cut tires of 15 cars and spread on the school death to the Arabs. So we have from in all levels of society those who support, and in all levels of society those who don't like what we do.
Yeah. Wow. So Nava, there's a question here from Shino about how you train educators or teachers to be neutral to both sides. And Shino's talking about how tricky neutrality is. And I should say Shino is a a mediator and has been involved with our restorative justice work as well. So she's been wrestling with those questions. And, you know, it would be interesting to hear how you folks think about that.
We, at the School for Peace, we don't think, we are not neutral. We have to be honest, and we have to be straightforward and not to manipulate groups, but we believe that the facilitators, and it's always, when we work, I didn't talk about it, but when we work, we co-facilitate. We co-facilitate a Jew and an Arab. When we do across the border, there is a Jew and an Arab, a Palestinian from within Israel and Palestinian from Palestine. So we believe that each of us, we don't come from neutral place, but we have some understanding of the situation in our country, and we are pretty critical of what is going on. We put our observations in the group, and people can argue with what we say. It's not that we have to say it's a dialogue, and the group is doing with it something. Sometimes they ignore it. That's fine. But we are not neutral. We don't think there is something like that. I think we have to be decent and not to manipulate and not to really brainwash. But the process is like that. The group is open, and people can bring things to the room about the conflict, and then a dynamic is developing. And then we see what is going on, and we reflect it to the group. We see here that, for example, the Jewish group is trying to split the Arab group. It's similar, and we connect it to the reality outside. They can argue with our observations. They don't have to accept it. But by the process of talking about it, they are becoming more and more aware. And every several sessions, we do uninational sessions in which the dynamic in the group is very emotional. People sometimes cry, sometimes they are angry, and sometimes they are very nervous and sitting uneasy in their chairs and so on. And the uninational is enabling each group to reflect upon the issues that are coming during the binational session. But we have to keep, and it's tricky, the question is important, is not to put too much, too early, if you give your intervention too early, so you miss the process and they will negate you. So we have to listen carefully and to look carefully to what is going on. And you can say it's one of the options to understand this, and let the group deal with it. And usually they do.
I think it's a very interesting approach to, a central question. I think for a long time, the belief around conflict resolution work was that it was essential that you come from a place of neutrality. And we know that that's not always what life is actually like. Mm-hmm. And I think that you folks in particular have been, I think, very constructive and creative and honest about the fact that, that we have perspectives and that conflict can be ugly and that we still need to do it. And that we still need to have those conversations. And I think there's a lot, I think, for all of us to learn there. We only have a little bit of time left, but I know that Nicole has another question. Nicole, do you want to ask this yourself?
I'm just curious about identity issues and how you have these two groups that have historically had a lot of tension, and now their children are learning and growing together. Are there any identity issues around that? Like in the United States, for example, there's something called passing, where light-skinned African-American people can be perceived as not African American? Do people over there do that or experience that?
I didn't get the examples that you said, the people, what they do.
We talk about passing, that often a light-skinned Black person who might be mistaken for white will sort of manage to maneuver more easily through society by taking advantage of being perceived that way. So are there Palestinians who can be perceived as Jewish?
We have similar phenomena here. You know, as I said, in the developmental stages of ethnic or national identities, so there are people that are coming to our process, and their accent is totally Hebrew accent, no really tiny Arabic accent. And they try to, but by the process, because I said for the Palestinians, the goal is to strengthen their identity and let them develop awareness of their identity and not internalizing racism. Like the guy that I read to you, that he said, first time in my life I could say that I'm a Palestinian. So we have many people, but they are going through a process to a more healthy identity, that you feel connected to your identity and you don't hate your identity and you don't internalize what white people or Jewish people are saying about your identity. There are enormous processes of trying to portray in Israel, the major image of a Palestinian is a terrorist, you know? And here you sit in a group and you see people that are intelligent like you, they are smarter than you sometimes, they're more knowledgeable about the conflict, and it's a big surprise when they go home and they feel like it contradicts all they have grown to believe in, and it's a good process, we think. And also the Palestinians, just to go out from the bunker, from the shelter. And one lady that I interviewed, she said, the fire of rebellion was many years gone, and here in this process, I lighted the fire again. Like they get this courage to talk to the Jews the way they really want to talk to them, not in a way that will ease it down and make things really okay, and to put the conflict on the table.
Yeah. Well, Nava, folks, I'll invite anyone who is comfortable and able in their current circumstances to turn their cameras back on. I'd like to give a proper thanks to Nava. You can also add notes in the chat. Zoom, it's hard to applaud out loud, but we can do Zoom applause. And thank you, Nava. It's really a great talk. It's the students in this program, as you know, are really dedicated to actually doing conflict work, and to hear from somebody like you who is doing such important work is really great. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor for me.
Great. Thank you all for coming.